I'm writing this in hopes that like I can write this and I can perform some magic trick and make all this go away.
From the Center for Creativity at the University of Pittsburgh, this is Processing, a podcast that questions, explodes, subverts, and in some cases confirms what you think you already know about creativity and the Pitt community. I'm your host, Shannon Fink. This season on Processing, we're exploring how creative makers work in times of intense social change and pressure. Can creativity help to sustain us through painful shared experiences like pandemics and protests, and through intensely intimate ones like the death of a loved one? And if so, how? For writer, artist, and former manager of learning design for Pitt's Center for Teaching and Learning, Tahirah Walker, the twin experiences of the pandemic and the summer's especially volatile political climate helped lead her toward work on a very personal project.
I have those panels about emotions that I'm trying to work on. I've also been trying to do something that I would want to use to honor my late mother. And that has been much more complicated than I expected. My mom and I were like, two chicks against the world for a long time. She raised me on her own for most of my growing up. And then, as an adult, she was my rock, so like we're not from here, but when I moved to Pittsburgh, my mom was just like, oh, I guess I'm moving to Pittsburgh. And she came here. And I think the idea was that she would help me, and that over time, became a situation where I really needed to help her. Her death was really very much a shock to me. And she died in 2016. So the world around me has shifted tremendously, right? Like, we had just spent the last 8 years with a president of the United States being a very different human being, right? And, so it's like my mom is gone and the world has really, really changed. And I'm trying to make something that honors her, and make something that really just shows my gratitude for everything that she gave me. And yet I find myself being like, but I really need you, like I really need to talk to you about this thing that's going on. It is not only a series of images that I'm creating, but also writing. And I call it Dear Mr. Wonder, because my mom was a big Stevie Wonder fan. And Stevie Wonder has this one song, it's actually called As, but people know it for like sort of its refrain. Anyway, he has this one line in there where he says, "Did you know that true love asks for nothing? Her acceptance is the way we pay." That's kind of the thing that I come back to as I write this and put together the images for it. What does it look like when somebody shows you true love? And what does it look like when you can accept that?
All of our lives have been changed by COVID-19. The ways we work, shop, and socialize have been subject to radical and rapid shifts unlike any we've experienced. Some of us have found ourselves adapting to new professional lives. while many, many more have found their jobs or entire industries under existential threat. But there are also now, at the time of this taping, over 225,000 Americans who have died of COVID-19. The friends and families of those Americans have not been immune to the changes inflicted by the virus on society at large. They've had to deal with this transformation while simultaneously bearing the most painful and intimate of losses. For photographer and videographer Ivette Spradlin, who teaches at Pitt, the toll of the coronavirus was both professional and very personal.
I mean, a lot of my work is thinking about how humans connect, and within that, like I think the connection is so important and so essential. And that's where, when we were told we were going into lockdown, and with my students and everything, I was thinking, like, this is going to be traumatic, especially for somebody in their 20s or early teens, or like, I mean, I know myself then, and it would have been really hard to not be social. Now it's pretty easy, but like then it would have really, really broke my heart, So another thread in my work has been like recreating certain things like that are like kind of photographic cliches or histories, and changing them and floating around. They had these family portraits of people in this during the Spanish flu epidemic, so, and they were all wearing masks, and there's one where they're holding a cat, and the cat's even wearing a mask, and I just really liked that imagery, and I was like, oh, I want to recreate this. Like, I want that family portrait with the masks as a document of this time. So I wrote my mess on the Facebook neighborhood group, and I said, and I put the picture of that family with the cat with the mask on there, and I said, hey, I want to take pictures like this, and would anybody want to step? I'm going to go walking tomorrow. Would anybody want to step out and have their photo taken? And so it was very casual, and actually I got a couple responses, and then the day I was supposed to go out, one of my close friends from grad school passed away. I think, also the hard part with that grief is that, and I'm sure a lot of people, if anybody's lost somebody during this time, is that you can't, you couldn't have like a memorial service, like all of these things, and nobody here really knew my friend, and so I didn't really know her friends that well, so it's like I'm a little bit alone with it for the most part. I know all of my friends have been wonderful in talking to me, but like there is some sort of closure or something that can happen with a funeral or memorial service, or just being around other people who loved her in the same way. I've heard of things closing down. I've heard of funding being lost, and I've watched friends lose opportunities, and I do wonder how it's gonna come back, or what's gonna be lost kind of for good.
The performing arts have been especially hard hit during the pandemic. The livelihoods of millions of performers are threatened, and while the situation is dire for large and venerable companies and venues, it's even more difficult for smaller ones. Locally, Brillo Box and the Rex Theater announced they were closing for good, and the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council's Emergency Fund for Artists had to close applications for COVID-19 relief after its funding ran out. The situation has left performers like Oronde Sharif, a dancer and lecturer in Africana Studies at Pitt, with difficult and often painful decisions to make.
So with my company here, we do an annual Christmas show called Black Nativity, written by Langston Hughes, and we do that around Christmas time in December. Well, we've been doing Black Nativity in Pittsburgh since 1993, and I've been in every show since 1993 of Black Nativity. And I've always played, for the most part, I played Joseph. Every once in a while, I try to find somebody else to play the Joseph character, because I'm like, at some point, I'm getting old, and somebody else needs to do it. So each year, navigating the new guidelines in terms of Pitt, in terms of bringing people onto campus and what space is going to be available, thinking about funding, thinking about venue, thinking about, how to keep that activity going. What are going to be the guidelines in terms of people sitting and social distancing? What's going to be the availability of space? And then you start thinking about what, not so much the audience, but the artists and the cast. What are they comfortable with? What would rehearsal look like? I actually just had a meeting yesterday with 4 people to just think of different ideas of how we can do this, but also thinking about the cast and space. So space and cast is probably the biggest thing. Money is always an issue because you never have enough. We're not Hamilton. We don't have, these $1 million sponsors and backers. And then, the other reality in Pittsburgh for a performer and a type of show that we do is just the proper space. And then being able to afford that proper space with all the lighting that you need, all the tech time that you need, all the rental space and rehearsal space that you need to properly do it. So those are the things that are going through my mind a lot more now than it had in the past. Before, it was just really about Pitt and working through their guidelines and budget. Now it's social distancing, people's comfortability, safety, space, money, and then whatever else happens.
Writer and Pitt MFA graduate Hannah Eko was supposed to have spent the spring on a writing residency in Spain when global shutdowns abruptly changed her plans. Programs everywhere were hastily closing up shop, but amid the chaos and the pain of the emerging pandemic, she found some stability and a sense of meaning in her writing practice.
I think that it's funny because that's how I actually think of writing, is it helps me to make sense, and also even just to kind of record my own confusion. And I think in the midst of a crisis, it's really about the same. I remember in military school wasn't the best fit for me, and I turned to writing quite a bit to help me to kind of release the feelings and the confusions I was having. So I feel I just have had much practice with that. I feel I'm constantly in these environments that don't entirely jive with my value system and personality. So right now, I think all of us are in the midst of this. I'm a sensitive person. Many people are. So of course, there are things that sometimes it get too much. I had to really be adamant, especially in the beginning, about how often I was checking the news and who I was talking to and what I was letting in. But as far as my work, I think I kept on. There are times too when I would think, is this actually important? Should I be doing something else? Because there are people out here who are actually dying, and we have all our emergency responders just risking their lives, and then our people who are working at the grocery stores who are also risking their lives doing these things. But I always come back to that idea. I think it's a quote by Toni Morrison, where she talks about how art is how civilizations heal, And so whatever you're doing, and doesn't have to be anything even lofty, that is a part of the healing process. So that I think is kind of like what kept me going and helped me to keep that like keep the chaos, I think, from like infiltrating into the work. Yeah.
For Pitt student and writer Craig Hayes, the multiplying tragedies of COVID-19 and the spring's high-profile murders of Black people came home to him in Houston. The Black Lives Matter movement and the killing of Black men and women in incidents of police brutality and other forms of racially motivated violence were not new, but the convergence with the global pandemic was, and the effects were immediate, profound, and painful. Craig turned again to his writing following the June killing of Toyin Salau, a young woman in Florida who was active in the Black Lives Matter movement. For him, this tragedy struck close to home.
Those. Sorry, I'm remembering when I wrote that, and so those two came out of the death of Toyin, Alua Toyin Salau. I'm sure you know, but for the people who don't, that she was a young girl. She was 19 years old, who was seeking refuge. I do believe she had run away at some point, was seeking refuge, and someone, the person that she sought refuge with, long story short, ended up killing her. And so I think that was also a heavy shift in my mindset, and just in my emotional state. Just I have 5 sisters, and it's my mom and my mom and my dad and my 5 sisters and me, packed house. But it's just with this, my heart was just incredibly heavy, because I have 3 younger sisters under me, and one of them is 19. And I remember it so vividly. Like, it was, I wrote the time down. It was 1:34 a.m. My mom had made a chocolate cake, and so I was downstairs, and I decided to cut myself a piece of cake to eat. And my friend sent me the article or the news that Toyin had passed, and I wrote it in the poem that my tongue went numb. I as I was eating the cake, it lost flavor, and I was I felt sick, just because my greatest fear has always been not being able to protect my sisters, and not being able to and something happening to them and I'm not there. That's where I wrote from. That's why I wrote the poem from. And the title, and She Became Chocolate Cake, it was, not only was I literally chocolate cake, but she became food. She became something to consume, an object, and it just broke my heart. That really did a number to me. There's a later poem or earlier poem that I wrote that, and I said I'm sorry my sisters have to read this, because as hard as I think I have it, it's just a fact that my sisters and my mom, who are Black women, they struggle so much, and they struggle so much in this society, way more than I do. And the reality is that I can't tell myself that 100% of the time, when I'm not there, even when I'm there, they're safe. I can't tell myself realistically that they have nothing to worry about. I had a dream about it this past night that my sister went out to ride a bike. My mom came inside, and my sister was gone when we went back to check out her. And earlier they actually went to go ride bikes because she wanted to ride her bike. And I remember when they walked outside, I started getting nervous. I picked up my notebook, I put on clothes, and I walked outside to make sure she was okay. That's where I was writing from. But it's basically just the increasingly hard reality and possibility that I was wrestling with. Next time, like I call them, like there's no guarantee that they will pick up the phone, and that's hard. That's like something that no one should really have to wrestle with.
Join us next week as the summer of 2020 continues to unfold and our guests begin to channel their emotion into action. Processing is a production of the Center for Creativity at the University of Pittsburgh. The team includes Jasmine Green, Mike Campbell, Nancy Kirkwood, Kit Ayars, Erik Schuckers, Chad Brown, and me, Shannon Fink. For more information, visit us online at creative.pitt.edu. Music in this episode is by Blue Dot Sessions.